Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Mr. James Sullivan, performing the non-exclusive functions and duties of the Assistant Secretary for Industry and Analysis of the United States Department of Commerce, to moderate a discussion on the digital economy featuring global executives.
Morning. Morning again. Please.
Good morning.
Is your water or my water? Okay. Can everyone hear us okay? So welcome to SelectUSA's first plenary session, a panel discussion on the digital economy. My name is Jim Sullivan. As I think you just heard, I work in the International Trade Administration at the Commerce Department, where I perform the duties of the Assistant Secretary for Industry and Analysis. I'll be serving as your moderator today. The mission of my particular bureau at Commerce, the International Trade Administration, is really to help create the conditions for U.S. industry to innovate and to compete at home and around the world. And a core focus increasingly of our mandate is on U.S. digital trade policy. We work to address a wide range of challenges for U.S. companies in the digital space, from data localization requirements and other limitations on cross-border data flows, infringement of U.S. IPR, forced technology transfer, web filtering, cybercrime, economic espionage, and state-directed theft of trade secrets. But today, however, I am very pleased to take a break from those overseas challenges to be able to focus and discuss some of the key advantages of operating here in the United States. And we are privileged this morning to have with us 4 senior executives from some of the leading multinational technology companies that really do help enable the global digital economy. I am joined on stage by Rick Cassidy, who's Senior Vice President, Corporate Strategy for Taiwan Semiconductor, Marcelo Claure, who is Chief Operating Officer of SoftBank Group, Rick Clemmer, Executive Director and CEO at NXP, and Professor Amnon Shashua, President and CEO at Intel's subsidiary Mobileye. So what I'd like to do is ask each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, and after that we can dive right into our conversation about why the United States is a critical part of your global businesses, and perhaps share some of your insights and suggestions for other countries that may be considering the United States. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our panelists to briefly talk about themselves and their companies.
Great. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. I'm honored. It's a privilege. So, Assistant Secretary, thank you for this invitation for TSMC. This is a special day for me. I'm actually celebrating 40 years in the semiconductor industry as of today. So it's a privilege to be with you. For the past 15 years or so, prior to the current position, I was CEO and President of TSMC North America. And I have had the privilege of watching the company grow over the past 22 years. Now, TSMC, it's a pretty unique company. I think that if I were to describe it, it's a company with a very unique business model. We're a pure-play foundry, founded in 1987. It's a simple business model to talk about. We have no products. We go to market through our customers, many of whom are on the stage today. What that means is it keeps our head clear, our hearts pure. We do everything that's necessary to help our customers succeed in the market. We believe in collaboration, and we believe that creating a proper platform, innovation can absolutely thrive. We've spent the past 32 years developing our own process technology. We're essentially a technology, capacity, manufacturing, and service company. And so it's a privilege to be part of the U.S. system and to support U.S. customers.
Thank you. Marcelo?
Thank you, and I'd like to recognize the Commerce Department, Secretary Ross, for bringing us together. It's quite a privilege to be here. I represent what I like to say one of the most exciting companies in the world. It is SoftBank. You got to think of SoftBank as two different types of companies. One is an operating company and an investment company. From an operating perspective, we made a lot of investments into the U.S. We made the largest Japanese investment ever made when it was the acquisition of Sprint a few years back. We are leading in the robotics area by doing the acquisition of Boston Dynamics. Those of you who've watched YouTube, those amazing humanoid robots that do many things, that's one of our companies. We're in the assets, so we manage close to $420 billion of assets spread throughout the world. And I would say the most exciting part, or the one that has us quite busy, is our SoftBank Vision Fund. It was the largest fund, the largest venture fund ever created. It's a $100 billion technology fund with our goal of identifying entrepreneurs and companies that are utilizing artificial intelligence in order to disrupt traditional industries. I would say that there's a high likelihood that most people in the audience walk up and use one of our products. So if you took an Uber, that's one of our large investments. If you go to WeWork and utilize a co-working location, that's another one of our large investments. If you order food and you get it through Uber Eats or DoorDash, that's one of our large investments. So we have invested close to $85 billion over the course of the last 2 years. We invest about $1 billion a week. We believe that we're the largest foreign direct equity investor into the US as we invest in disruptive American companies that are challenging the status quo. So we love an audience like this in order for us to be able to explain in terms of how do we see the world and how the world is about to go in what we like to say the artificial intelligence revolution, where there will be more disruption in the next 20 to 30 years than in the last 300 years. So excited to be here and be able to share some of our thinkings with the rest of the audience.
Thank you. Rick?
Thank you. NXP is a leading semiconductor company that happens to be headquartered in the Netherlands, but with a global presence. The semiconductor industry is truly a global industry. We have found it to be important to be in the U.S. In fact, so important that we bought Freescale, which was the Motorola semiconductor business a few years ago, to be sure we had access to the leading technology to focus on secure connections for the smarter world. We're the leading semiconductor supplier in the automotive industry, very focused on autonomous driving, and in the near term, making driving safer with level 2 and 3 autonomous driving, but also focused on the edge, how we can use the disruption of the cloud to make all of our lives easier, whether it's in mobile payments, getting on transit systems, whether it's facilitating inspection equipment to drive down the number of employees required when you don't have access to available talent, but very focused on how to make all of our lives easier and better as a company.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Professor?
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mobileye, today an Intel company. We develop machine learning, artificial intelligence, and system on chips that power today's driving assist systems. And we are developing the technology to power autonomous cars in the future. Our technology is on more than 40 million cars. So if you drive a car today that was purchased in the last decade, most likely it has a driving assistance system, and with a very, very high probability, it is powered by our system on chip. And I'm also a professor of computer science.
Thank you all again for being with us. Again, the title of our panel is The Digital Economy, which sweeps up and encompasses quite a bit. And I think it's fair to say that as a general matter, the digital economy in the US is often regarded as having some very big advantages, very large domestic market, risk-taking investment culture, a multitude of innovative companies, and world-class universities, among other things. So for my panelists today, the first question for me is an obvious one. Why did you and why did your companies choose the United States? And I think probably just makes sense to continue the order we've started in. So Rick, if I could turn it over to you, would love to hear about what factors your company may have considered when evaluating investment opportunities here in the United States.
Great question, and the answer is real simple. The U.S. is simply the best environment to invest in. It commands better than 20% of foreign direct investment. And I have to tell you, after 40 years in Silicon Valley, I've got a few empirical observations that I would share with you. First, the U.S. commercial and academic institutions are top-notch. The talent that they draw is the best in the world, and I think it creates an innovative environment that is absolutely necessary for the success of semiconductors. More important, it's a predictable and transparent legal system, and it's especially effective in protecting IP. And in semiconductors, today we are producing the world's most advanced process technology at 5 nanometer. If you think about that from a different perspective, 5 nanometers is 1/100,000th the width of your hair. If you think about what that means, you can print 20 or more billion transistors on a chip. It requires a high degree of specialization. It requires a high degree of trust. And that's something that you have in the United States, and that's the reason that the United States leads in IC design. So it's our most important market. It's a business-friendly state and local environment to work in. Matter of fact, it is so welcoming that we built a foundry, a factory in Camas, Washington. So thank you very much, Washington. And as I said, the U.S. leads in design. So it's necessary for us to be here. TSMC will absolutely continue to strengthen our efforts in the U.S. to drive collaboration and, most importantly, keep the U.S. at the forefront of innovation.
Thank you for that.
So
Marcelo.
SoftBank is a Japanese company. We're not allied to the United States. We stand behind our commitments. I don't know how many are aware, but 2 years back, we made a public commitment to the United States that we were going to invest $50 billion in the course of the next 5 years, and that we were going to employ 50,000 people. You know, we're proud to report that it hasn't been 5 years. It's been 2 years. And so far, we've invested over $30 billion in the US, and we have created close to 42,000 new jobs. And the reason why, thank you. And the reason we do it is quite simple, right? The US is the land of innovation. US is the land of entrepreneurship. I am a living example. You know, I like to recognize the delegation from Bolivia that I saw earlier this morning. And the reason why is I'm from Bolivia, and I'm one of those stories of somebody who came to the US with absolutely nothing, and I was lucky to have built the world's largest wireless distribution company. So it is, and my partner or my boss, Masayoshi Son, is also an entrepreneur, and he came to the US with nothing. And it is because of this country that we've grown today to lead one of the largest companies in the world. So we love the US, we love that it encourages entrepreneurship, that encourages innovation. We like that there are very clear rules of engagement. We like that there's a level playing field. We like that there is venture and private equity capital available to help entrepreneurs. So when you put together, I would say, a poster child in terms of a country where you want to come invest, it is basically the United States. And this is why we made that commitment. This is why the most innovative companies in the world are part of our portfolio. And these are the companies that are basically changing the way healthcare is going to happen in the future, the way transportation is redefining the way we move, the way we work, the way we live, the way we communicate. So we are huge fans of the U.S., and we will continue to honor the commitments that we made to the U.S.
Thank you, Marcelo, for your comments, but also for affirming that the American dream is still alive and well. Rick?
Yeah, so I think the U.S. is an unusual country in that you have the ability to really be at the heart of the creation of innovation. And it's really difficult in a global industry with global customers not to be able to tap into the innovative horsepower associated with the U.S. And in addition to that, the IP protection, the intellectual property protection that you can have assurance of and be sure that your property is taken care of and protected is a critical element in any technology company. So I think the strengths of the U.S. are clearly the innovation, that's at the forefront. We've had a lot of discussion about the great educational institutions. There are good institutions around the world, but at the forefront of driving innovation, I think you have to have access to the innovative leaders in the technology world that are based in the U.S. in conjunction with the support that you can get from around the world. In addition to that, the ability to protect your intellectual property, which is at the heart of all technology, and being able to support that, which is one of the strengths of the U.S., is extremely important in moving forward. For our company, as a global company, while it's headquartered in the Netherlands, we believe that the U.S. market is critical to our success, as well as the innovation and resources in the U.S. to be able to support our global customer base.
Thank you, Rick. Professor, you're both an academic and a CEO, so in addition to hearing about Mobileye's reasons for investing in the United States, I think if you could, we'd love to hear you elaborate a bit more on the workforce and the American educational system and how that contributes to the culture that we've been talking about.
Well, I think non-U.S. companies, they look at the U.S. for scale. Scale in terms of addressable market, scale in terms of the financial systems when you want to raise capital, for example, and scale in terms of skilled workforce. And I think the U.S. has 4 attractive factors, 3, and the 4th one is a derivative. The first one, the U.S. is governed by the rule of law. It's a thriving democratic system with checks and balances. We normally take it for granted, but it's not obvious at all. Second, it is the biggest and most complex financial system in the world. So if you want to raise capital, you would like to have your company traded in the U.S., your stock will be traded at the maximal effort if it's in the U.S. Third, it is the cradle of innovation. The largest number of unicorns, more than 120 in the last 10 years since 2009. 3% of the GDP is invested in R&D and very, very high skilled workforce. Now, the 4th factor is a derivative of these 3, is that it's a magnet for talents all over the world. People come to the US, they study, get their degree, and then remain in the workforce. And this influx of talents from all over the world creates an out-of-the-box innovation. I think this factor, although it's a derivative of the other 3, is the most important factor that distinguishes the US from any other place on the globe. The fact that most young people, they see the US as the place where they can implement their dreams, and they come and study and stay in the workforce. Mobileye, for example, when in 2014, we decided to go for an IPO in the US. We were traded at the New York Stock Exchange until we were acquired by Intel. And the ability to have access to capital was crucial in our scaling up as a small startup.
Thank you. So I think it's probably fair to say that the conventional wisdom among some in business is that government should probably have a very limited role when it comes to spurring or fostering innovation, or even a very limited role in the economy in general. I think the thinking goes that they should, on balance, probably intervene only in extreme cases, perhaps where there are market failures. In your experience in the United States, what role has the government, either at the federal or state level or both, played in fostering innovation, at least in your experience or with your companies? Rick?
Great question. Let me start by saying I think one of the best examples where the federal government has done the right thing is in federally funded development and research centers. By last count, I think it's over 40. I think the number's probably about 44. This is where private sector works closely with government to really produce cost-effective technology, policy systems, system acquisition integration. And these things, I think, are vital to government operations. It spurs innovation and it preserves the U.S. tech base, which I think is absolutely critical. The FDDRCs take on, I think, a very critical role because they approach high-risk R&D operations that really complement the private sector, which is market-driven, really. So working together, I think they strike a very good balance and foster our nation's reputation for having a culture of innovation.
Marcelo.
So I think federal government is doing a good job in terms of balancing national security, and something that we have a lot of involvement is CFIUS, right? And I've seen a great improvement of the government as it relates to streamline CFIUS process, which is quite important for a company like SoftBank, who, on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, we're investing in a few American companies. So I've seen a great improvement in that. Now, where I see that the U.S. government needs to play a key role is this world is going to change at a speed, and we're about to enter probably the most important technological revolution that we have ever had, and we call that the artificial intelligence revolution. And people say, what? Why is that, right? Today, the world connects about 6 billion people to mobile phones. The way we read the world is in the next 10 to 20 years, there's going to be 1 trillion connected things, right? So we're moving from connected people to pretty much connecting anything that we know. And 5G is going to play a key role in terms of connecting things. The level of new compute you're going to need, if you think about it, in the future, we're going to have 1 trillion connected things, just basically enabling, throwing data, and this is where artificial intelligence comes into play, and having the ability to read that data in order to make better use of that data to predict what's going to happen. Obviously, we're a little biased. We believe that the current merger between Sprint and T-Mobile, that's under review by the federal government, is going to play a key role in terms of allowing the U.S. to continue its leadership in 5G, and we're counting on the government basically to look at that as a favorable event in order for the U.S. to not lose the 5G, I wouldn't call it a war, but the 5G race that is going to be so important in the future of what happens to our country as it relates to innovation in new technologies.
Thank you, Marcelo. Rick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the environment that the U.S. has, which fosters and creates innovation, is essential to be able to continue to move the world forward. As Marcel talked about, everything's going to be connected. That's going to make all of our lives easier, and that innovation really comes out of the creativity associated with the U.S. as well as other countries around the world, but at the heart of it is the U.S. And one of the strong things and one of the really important things is being able to protect the intellectual property. And one of the things that the U.S. does an excellent job of and must continue to do is to be able to protect that intellectual property so that you get a fair return on the investment that you make. And I think that's really at the heart of what's important associated with the U.S. role.
Thank you. Professor, what are your thoughts?
I think the U.S. government, through its various agencies, have been playing a pivotal role in fostering innovation. The first agency that comes in mind is DARPA, the defense agency. The internet began as ARPANET, and that was, fostered by DARPA. If you look at autonomous driving, back in 2004 till 2007, DARPA initiated autonomous grand challenges. At first, it was off-road grand challenges, and then, city grand challenge. And much of the technology that you see out there by various actors in autonomous driving, the birth of it was of those grand challenges. If you look recently, the Department of Transportation has issued grants that foster testing of autonomous cars. And those kinds of results can further regulation that will enable autonomous cars to be on the road in the near future. So I think that the U.S. government has been playing a pivotal role in fostering innovation.
I think it's a great point, and I think you just touched on this, but certainly I think billions of public sector dollars have flowed toward downstream applied research, and in many cases they've even provided early stage financing for companies. So I think you mentioned DARPA, I know NASA, the Small Business Innovation Research Program, National Science Foundation. I think there's a variety of different efforts that perhaps are not as well marketed or as well known as perhaps they should be. So thank you for your insights. on those. Shifting gears a bit, you're all sort of in the, I'll use the umbrella term, the tech space. But your businesses obviously all reach far beyond just the tech sector. Increasingly, companies here and elsewhere, and your companies work with large companies, small companies in what some term more traditional industries as well. Examples that come to mind, the automotive industry, healthcare, financial services, as was stated earlier, a great deal of disruption in a lot of these traditional spaces. Could you give us a few examples of how you and your companies may be partnering or investing in or working with some of these traditional spaces that are being increasingly disrupted?
Great question, Jim. Thank you. Indeed, I think it precisely reflects what's going on in semiconductors today. If you will, the pure play foundry model that Dr. Morris Chang founded over 30 years ago is a great example of something that really changes the innovation model. If you will, before 1987, when the company was founded, there were less than 50 IC companies on the planet. Today, with the change that took place in that model, there's thousands of companies, large and small. I sometimes joke about the fact that TSMC is working with two guys in a garage, one the engineer and one the marketing and sales guy. And indeed, that is in fact the case. And there's a resurgence in venture capital investment for reasons that Marcelo talked about with respect to artificial intelligence, 5G, just a ripe environment for disruptive innovation. If you will, what TSMC did when it created the foundry model is it relieved the IC design companies of the need to spend, and today, the expense to build a modern fab at 5 nanometer is more than $8 billion. That's a big number. But in order to run the processes that are needed to create the canvas on which these IC designs are run, requires a $4 billion investment for each subsequent node. So by relieving that capital-intensive expense from the IC design companies, they were able to focus solely on doing the design. Now, I talked about creating more than 20 billion transistors on a single chip. It requires a very complete ecosystem to be able to do that. It requires a very high degree of specialization and focus and cooperation between many, many different companies to be able to pull off a chip that can yield in high quantity with 20 billion plus working transistors. That requires something that is at the foundation of what TSMC does, integrity and trust. The U.S. is great at protecting IP and trade secrets, and when you're working at that level of intimacy, it's absolutely an imperative that trust is paramount, or else the system simply can't work. So the model has really spurned a lot of growth. If you will, I think that what Morris did was, number one, founded the foundry industry. Second, he really enabled the fabless industry to grow. And he was able, third, to enhance the adjacent industries such as design automation, building, we call them IP blocks, but the building blocks that are needed to go into these chips, because when you're trying to fill the space of 20 billion transistors, you can't do it all yourself. And then there's the design services companies that wrap around this. So it's been a very transformative model, all founded on trust.
Thank you.
Marcelo.
Marcelo.
Right, so let us share the views of what we see is going to happen next, right? If you look at what happens in the last few years, we've created the world's most valuable companies, right? Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook. But if you look at what have they really disrupted, Facebook and Google, all they disrupted is 1% of the GDP, which is basically advertising. They have disrupted the traditional ways of advertising, and most of the digital advertising goes through them. Amazon is in the process of disrupting retail. and that amounts to 6-7% of the GDP. The next 20 years are going to be marked by the disruption of every single traditional industry, the other 93% of the GDP, the other $72 trillion that haven't been disrupted. The world's going to change at an accelerated pace towards you're going to see, for example, let's talk about real estate, right? One of our portfolio companies is an amazing company called Caterra. And Caterra is a technology company in the construction space. What is Caterra going to do? It's going to prefabricate your house. So we'll be able to deliver a house to you in 48 hours. So think about the process today. You design a house, you go through an architect, you go through a contractor, and then luckily a year and a half later, you have a home. You look at Compass, a technology company in the real estate brokerage system, where it should be easy to basically link a buyer and a seller in a better way than having to go see 6, 8, 10 houses before you can make a decision. Or look at a company like Open Door. It's a company that basically, leveraging artificial intelligence, we're able to price your house and buy your house that exact same day without having to list your house for a year, 6 months, 9 months. If you look at mobility, look what Uber has done. I'll tell you, and I'll share this quick story about my daughter, right? When my daughter turned 18, like a proud father, I said, hey, daughter, here's your present. I'm buying you a car. And my daughter said, no, thank you. I said, why in the world would I want a car? I got to figure out where to park it. I got to put gas. I got to clean it. I got to do all those mundane things of owning a car. Dad, give me the money so I can Uber. Right? Think about how much time we spend in going to a supermarket. I mean, that still blows my mind how we got to go, we got to drive for 20 minutes, we got to find parking, we got to go do the same aisles that we do every couple of weeks. We buy the exact same thing. You go there, you wait in line 20 minutes, they say paper or plastic, you load it into your car. I mean, that's ridiculous. Today, we all buy the same thing every week. There should be an app that tells us, hey, this is your grocery order, and that order should be delivered to your home. So I don't see there'll be that many supermarkets 10 to 20 years. Hopefully nobody in the audience owns supermarkets. And I can go on and on and on. In pretty much every single industry in the world is going to be massively redefined. So for entrepreneurs around the audience, for people who have new ideas, the beauty is through the use of artificial intelligence, the other 93% of the world's GDP is going to be massively disrupted in the next 20 years. So there's about $70 trillion, and what we think is, yes, we've seen the first set of companies that have been the first $1 trillion companies. We think in the next few years, we're going to see the next $10 trillion companies as we disrupt logistics, as we disrupt real estate, as we disrupt fintech, as we disrupt healthcare, as it is today. So we look forward to partner with all these new entrepreneurs who know how to leverage data to disrupt traditional businesses.
So Rick, we just had some very comprehensive and inspirational insights on what the future may hold. Anything NXP is doing
Absolutely.
in terms of partnering with traditional companies and either at NXP or what you may be witnessing?
Right. So when we talk about the Internet of Things and the disruption that it allows, our whole life will be changed. Everything that we do, machines will be connected, whether it's cars or whether it's industrial machines, the whole world's going to be connected, which is going to make all of our lives easier. One of the things that has to happen is how you can take advantage of the disruption that the cloud allows, and to be able to get the right information to the cloud so that you can do the processing. So NXP is partnering with the cloud providers to be sure that we can do the pre-processing at the edge so that the correct information gets to the cloud so that it can actually be used to be able to do that disruption, and then take the results from the artificial intelligence and the inferencing and then drive it down to taking the actions associated with it with machine learning acceleration. So we're partnering with the cloud providers as well as our customers, our industrial customers and automotive customers, to be able to drive a more complete solution, driving the ease of use and how it has a significant change in the way that we do things, whether it's making driving safer, lane change warning, auto stop, reducing the number of accidents. You know, you can talk about fully autonomous driving at some point in time, but in the interim, just making driving safer is a really important element that changes all of our lives and will protect some friend or family member that would have been injured or possibly killed in an accident before. So making driving safer is an important part of what we do, partnering with the auto companies and all of our customers to be able to drive that capability.
So that's a perfect lead-in for you, Professor, with Mobileye, whose entire business model or the core focus is around these driving assistance systems.
So Mobileye partners with all the major car makers, Ford, GM, Chrysler, major tier one suppliers like Delphi. But we also work with the small companies, startups in the areas of sensors, map distribution, high definition map making. Some of those relationships have turned into acquisitions through Intel's investment arm. Intel Capital has a portfolio of hundreds of companies. More than $8.4 billion have been invested in US companies. I think such a magnitude of investment is game-changing to the US ecosystem. I don't think that there is a single VC with such a magnitude except SoftBank of investment. So we are both partnering, working with big and small companies, and through Intel also acquiring whenever it is necessary to acquire.
Thank you. So we've talked a bit about the culture in the United States, the culture of innovation, and some of the efforts by the federal government. We've talked about a lot of the disruption you're seeing. We've got this coming wave of data-driven innovation that's really already upon us in many ways, and how it's disrupting traditional industries. In my experience in the international space, I think the United States is a bit of an outlier in that most countries tend to focus their FDI or house their FDI apparatus and efforts with the national government. We obviously have that with the federal government, but then we have this other layer, this sort of countervailing, decentralized approach with different states and their efforts to attract FDI, and even localities. And a lot of that has really helped with the development of innovation hubs and tech hubs around the country. Have you all seen, and Rick, again, I'll start with you, we'll keep the order going, examples of either state or local government efforts in the United States to attract investment that you think are worthwhile, that are successful and worth replicating?
Absolutely. I talked about the fact that the business-friendly state and local policies in the Washington and Camas area were so welcoming that we invested there. I really think that those really have a huge impact because we like to be a part of a community that we're with. And I will tell you, after a quarter century of being in the state of Washington, I'm proud to report that we've really become an integral part of the community there, where we've really worked with the outreach program for disadvantaged children. And this past year, we had 611 volunteers that were in the local schools helping out. I think that's really important. If I go back to the federal level, I think there's something going on there that's very important, and that is the ERI, or the Electronics Resurgence Program, which is a 5-year program with $1.5 billion that was created by DARPA, launched in June of 2017, is really important. The idea of scaling, and if you will, well, let me ask a question, if I can get a little audience participation. Do any of you, by show of hands, either have a smartphone or a personal computer? Well, what that demonstrates is the success of Taiwan working with the United States, because all of you have in your possession TSMC chips. I thank you very much for that. Now, let me give you an example, because I work in a domain that's so small, it's really hard to talk about. So if you thought about semiconductors in a different way, if you thought about 40 years ago, take the island of Manhattan in New York, and you scaled it at the same pace that semiconductors have, the whole island would fit in to the display on your smartphone. Now, if we continue forward at the same pace for the next 40 years, the landmass of the entire world would fit into that same display. Wrap your head a little bit around what I just said. Because if you think about how complex things are, when I started, I was really proud that I was part of Seymour Cray's supercomputer, the Cray 1. Today, that phone that I just showed you is 2,000 times more powerful. The Cray 1 would take up about a third of this stage. This fits in your pocket, it's thousands of times more powerful. So the ERI is really important because we want to see CMOS technology continue to scale and deliver on the promise and the capability, because what Marcelo, you just talked about, is going to be made possible because of the platform of CMOS technology. And ERI is really working to complement and provide adjacencies that will continue to drive Moore's Law into the future and be able to deliver on the promises, sir, that you have just delivered to this audience. So I think that's another very important initiative.
No, you're completely right. I mean, if you look at what has happened, why we're huge believers, and we've talked about singularity, is because the processing, the speed, and the storage capacities of the chips have basically been improved by 1 million times over the course of the last 10 years. And what's amazing, they're going to improve another 1 million times in the next 10 years. So the two gentlemen on my left and my right, their companies have the ones that have actually allowed for all this new revolution to happen. Now, what happens, so what's the future as we paint it, right? And I'll say the US does a lot of great things, but there's a lot of areas that we need to improve. And I will say something. A lot of people ask me, with the world changing, with artificial intelligence, with robotics, with IoT, what's going to happen? How should we educate our kids? And I will tell you, my number one concern that I face today in the US is the lack of engineers that we're producing in comparison to other countries like China, right? Other countries are basically producing to the tune of 6 to 7 times. You know, I think in the US we produce, depends on what data, 600,000 to 700,000 engineers, and countries like China are producing 4.5 million engineers. That is going to be a problem, and I think where the government could put a lot more help is we basically need to redefine our education, where it's hard to believe that we're back at saying that maybe being an MBA is not the thing of the future, as it's been the last 20 years. I don't know how many MBAs we got in the audience, but what we're going to need is data scientists, artificial intelligence engineers, because all the data that is going to be produced is going to have to be analyzed, is going to have to be enhanced by these data scientists. So if there's a message that I like to deliver, since we have a lot of government officials and we have a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of delegation from all over the world, is we need to make sure that we get back at producing, because we do produce the best engineers in the world at MIT, at Stanford, at Carnegie Mellon, at Caltech, at all the great universities that we have, but we don't produce them enough. And that is going to hurt us in the future unless we do that, because you can have all the investment in the world. When the world is changing at the rate of speed is changing, we got to make sure that we get back at producing not only the best, but be able to produce more engineers.
I in no way disagree with you, and I take no offense as someone with an MBA. I think you're probably right. But I'll just offer a quick point. I'd be curious to get feedback from you. We do need more engineers, but what we're seeing in the digital space around the world, with AI, with these questions, these ethical questions related to algorithms and things of that nature, I do hear a lot of calls for, in addition to the STEM resources and people focusing on an engineering background, ethicists, so people with maybe a liberal arts background who really I don't know if that's something that you focus on. I mean, certainly that's a great strength in the United States, I think, with the liberal arts education we have. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
No, we do have. I think we have the best education in the world. We have the best educational institutions in the world. But what I'm saying is, when a world is going to change, where data becomes the most important asset that companies have, that data needs to be analyzed by computers, and computers got to be programmed by data scientists. So that's why I say, now, of course we do need liberal arts, of course we need doctors, of course we need lawyers and MBAs and others, but we're lagging behind in this, and that's an area that we have to pay closer attention to make sure that we have the right amount of engineers, because the new currency is data, and we got to make sure that we know how to manage that currency. I'll finish by saying, I have a picture that I keep in my office, and that is the exact same picture of Fifth Avenue in New York. And the first one shows back in the early 1900s, where all you saw was horse carriages. Then you went 10 years later, and all you saw was Model T. You had a Ford basically doing that car. And then that exact same picture in the 80s, you see the yellow cabs in New York City. Now you took a picture in the exact same space, and all you see is Uber and Lyft, this exact same place. And fast forward 10 to 15 years, all you're going to see is autonomous cars driving that. So if we know that that's coming, we got to start preparing our kids. It's related to education. We know that every single car, or the vast majority of cars in the not so distant future, is going to be a car that's going to be an autonomous car. So a lot of change coming.
So Marcelo and Rick both anticipated my next question, so I'm going to give the other Rick 2 bites at the apple. If there are any particular state or local initiatives that you think provide a great example, but also your thoughts on the biggest challenges and opportunities with this new wave of innovation we're seeing with AI, robotics, et cetera.
I think one of the things that's interesting, and I'll go back a few years to the Secretary Fox of the Department of Transportation did the Smarter City Award, where he actually went around to all the cities in the U.S. and let all of them bid on a process to become a smarter city so that they would receive a $50 million grant to be able to facilitate achieving that. The finalists in that process included cities like Austin, Kansas City, a number of cities across the country, but then Columbus, Ohio was actually the winning city. And what they were able to do is bring together the local environment where they more than matched the funding that was coming from the federal government to be able to facilitate actual implementation of the Smarter City Award to see how we could change the city. And NXP worked with both Secretary Fox as well as Department of Transportation as well as the City of Columbus to be able to help facilitate that so they could use that as a proof point about how the world's going to change, how vehicle-to-vehicle communications, being able to improve the flow of traffic, make all of driving safer. And I think that's a good example about municipalities, states, and the federal government coming together to really be able to drive innovation moving forward.
So, Professor, I'm going to put we're running short on time. The last question to you with a bit of a spin. What emerging technologies do you think are going to have the greatest effect on U.S. investment in the next 5 years? And what advice would you offer to other foreign investors looking to come to the U.S.?
Well, I look at the next 5 years as the near term and the long term. The near term, I think the most disruptive technology that we see is autonomous cars. That will change everything. It will change the way we own cars. It will change the way we design cities. It will change mobility. It will change everything. And the science is there. The next big thing is look at artificial intelligence. Today, artificial intelligence is very narrow. It is a set of algorithms that can solve very specific problems. In pattern recognition, in machine translation, the real promise of AI is the broad intelligence, the kind of intelligence that we humans exercise every day. Now, 5 years ago, it would be science fiction to say that at some point machines will have broad intelligence. But I think in a window of 5 years, it seems quite reasonable because the field is progressing rapidly. That within a window of 5 years, we can start seeing elements of broad artificial intelligence also making huge disruptions for the betterment of society. Last word I want to say is about education, since it was mentioned here. I'm the product of the U.S. education system. I did my PhD at MIT. I did my postdoctorate at MIT. I taught at Stanford. If you look at STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, in 2019, 39% of college degrees were in STEM. Sounds impressive, sounds very good. But in China, it's 50%. And in a small country in the Middle East called Israel, it's 47%. So I think there's more to do. Promote more minorities, promote women, reduce cultural barriers. There's more to do in order to make sure that the U.S. continues to lead on the technological front.
So I know we could talk about this for several more hours, but we are the first panel, and I don't want to be guilty of putting the whole day behind. I do want to thank all of our panelists, Rick Cassidy, Marcelo, Claure. Did I get it right?
You got it right.
I did. Rick Clemmer and Professor Shashua, thank you all for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.